Hello, welcome. Thank you guys for joining us today. We are so glad that you are able to take time out of your busy schedules to join us for another Genealogy Center program. We are delighted to have a guest speaker with us, and we are so happy to be able to have somebody come in and acknowledge this historic Remembrance Day. So it is very important to remember all the things throughout history, and this is one of them. So thank you so much for joining us. So today we are going to be hearing from Peppy Margolis. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She currently works for the Stockton Center on Successful Aging at Stockton University and Galloway, New Jersey. She plans and presents programs for older adults. In 1984, she received a scholarship to study in Israel and began a career in Holocaust education. She's written Elementary Education in the U.S., which was endorsed by the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. So she has had quite a bit of experience, and we are so delighted to have her today, and hopefully everybody will enjoy. And please put questions in the Q&A. But Peppy, you want to get started?
Yes, thank you for the introduction, for joining me today, and many thanks to your Genealogy Center. I guess you're in, if I have the right location, in Wayne, Indiana. Thank you for hosting this, and of course, for Dr. David Burdick, the director of SCOSA, and Jean McGuire, who encouraged me to tell my story. And you're right, today is Yom HaShoah, and I'll be sharing my family history, which has greatly affected my life and my family. So we're starting out by meeting my father. I'd like to introduce you to my dad, David Israel Schwartzberg. And here he is, so happy, greeting the American liberator, a chaplain with the U.S. Army, Rabbi Herschel Schachter. They met at the 50th, this is when they met again, at the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Buchenwald, April 11th, 1995. This was such a joyous occasion for him, and it was very unusual. I brought my father to this anniversary of liberation, and the German children, which they call the second generation, and grandchildren of Nazi perpetrators greeted us at Buchenwald with flowers and apologies for what their families had done. They were very kind to us, and they kept saying, "I'm so sorry." And for the first time, my father heard those words, "I'm sorry." He had in all his life never heard that. And it so was important for him. It really changed him. And we talked about how you can't blame children for the sins of their parents. This is Sergeant Leon Bass. He was also an American liberator at the gates of Buchenwald. And oftentimes, the first soldiers that came into these camps and death camps and labor camps were Black soldiers. Even though they were the first ones to enter the camps, they were the ones who had to sit in the back of the tanks and the buses. Leon amazed my father. He had never seen a Black person before, but he thought, well, is it possible that God is Black? He was so happy to be liberated. Leon became a superintendent of Philadelphia schools, and I did reunite them 50 years later on the stage at Raritan Valley Community College, where I was the director of the Holocaust Institute. And at this picture, a very special time, April 27th, 1945, was the second night of Passover when Rabbi Herschel Schachter leads a service, and my father and his cousin well, first here's Rabbi, all the way on the left is Rabbi Schechter. In the first row on the right, in this area, is my father and his cousin, Joe Schwartzberg. They survived together. And now you get to meet Rabbi Schechter again. He's in the center. This is my cousin, Joe Schwartzberg, and my father, David. This was, if you remember, the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Buchenwald. It was wonderful to see them celebrating their freedom. But my cousin, Joe Schwartzberg, is considered one of the boys of Buchenwald. It was the beginning of June in 1945. They left for France. All these boys that were under the age of 14 were selected to go to, this group went to France. There was another group, I think, went to Switzerland, and that was to rehabilitate them, to educate them. And unfortunately, this was a separation from my father and his cousin, but my cousin identified all these children. He's in this area in the beginning, first row or two. We were at the U.S. Holocaust Museum when my cousin Joe, who was visiting from Melbourne, Australia, was walking through the exhibitions and totally by chance recognized himself. He couldn't believe it. He was thrilled to see himself. And he identified most of the boys in this picture. They had this picture from a black and white photo with an American soldier had taken. Nobody knew what this was, but my cousin Joe identified the people. They became known as the boys of Buchenwald. And every year in Melbourne, Australia, the Buchenwald boys that survived and went to Melbourne celebrate on April 11th. They called it a Buchenwald Ball. And they made a movie of this. I talked to my cousin last night and he was thrilled to have the ball. They're still having this ball, but only 3 of the boys that went to Melbourne have survived. So this is my dad in the DP camp and called Salzheim. Now my father, after liberation from Buchenwald, was looking for his survivor family. He was convinced that it was okay to take a train to Germany where the survivors were located because they had nowhere to go. And it was on the train, not here. This is before he got to the DP camp. On the way to this DP camp, he was on a train where he met my mother. He walked on the train, always looking for family, always looking for someone who might have survived. And he saw my mother and threw her an orange. She was so grateful. She hadn't seen an orange in about 4 or 5 years. And my father never forgot her face. He was so in love with my mother. And he continued on the train. She got off the train. She went to this place called Salzheim. The Americans set up different displaced persons camp for those survivors, not knowing what to do with them. My father did not have any clothing. When he was liberated at Buchenwald, someone stole his striped pajamas. In Buchenwald, that's what they wore. And he had the number of his, well, they no longer went by names. They had numbers, and his number was on the pocket of his striped clothing. And at liberation, he took them off because they were, of course, filthy and ripped and someone stole them. Why they would want this, we don't know, but he had no clothes, and an American soldier felt sorry and gave him his own uniform. So now my father walks around with the US Army uniform, and wherever he went, people thought the Americans thought that he was an American soldier, and they kept asking him directions. And he could only say right. So he said to everybody right, but they walked around a circle and came back. And he didn't know how to tell them to go left. These were friends in the displaced persons camp. Clearly, it was joyous to be free. And I believe that's my dad in the front. But in any case, he was posing here with the Red Cross in Salzheim. And he caught up with my mother. He found her in Salzheim. He was thrilled. And he said, "Oh, what's your name? Do you remember me? I threw you the orange." And my mother says, "Oh, yes, I remember the orange." But anyway, he courted her. They got married in Salzheim, October 23rd, 1945. This was their wedding picture. This was their wedding celebration. And this is my parents. I'll introduce you to Sarah Setterbaum and David Schwartzberg. Both of my parents are Holocaust survivors whose families were decimated. My mother, Sarah Setterbaum, was 18 at liberation. She is the sole survivor of her family, which was from Raritan, Poland, near Lublin and Chelm. And it was a miracle that she survived 2 death camps, Majdanek and Auschwitz, for the entire time she was in 2 death camps. Very unusual that someone should survive that long. She was saved by a Russian soldier on a death march from Auschwitz, where she was frozen in the snow. A year ago, on January 27th, 2022, the day of International Holocaust Remembrance, which was the same as the day the first death camp was liberated, Auschwitz. We had 2 snowstorms totaling almost 20 inches. I couldn't get to my car. It was filled. I couldn't walk. The snow was, up to my door. I couldn't open the door. How do I get out? What do I do? And I only thought of my mother, who was frozen in the snow. I finally was able to manage. I wore boots, I had gloves, a warm coat, and yet I was freezing. The wind, it was a blizzard out there. How did my mother survive? She had TB, dysentery, starvation, abuse, and my mother never spoke. Only one story. Her brother, who was 6'2", my mother had 2 brothers that were older than her. She didn't know they survived. They were sent from Majdanek, like she was, to Auschwitz. She had no idea. She thought everyone died in Auschwitz. A week before liberation, a skeleton walks into her barracks. He was 6'2", a skeleton. They called him a muscle man, which means a walking dead. He saw her and said, "Sarah, don't you remember me?" She had no clue. "Who are you?" "I'm your brother." She couldn't believe that he survived. The Russians are at the gates of Auschwitz. He said to her, "I don't know how I got here. I don't know how I walked." He walked past the killer dogs, past Nazis with guns. How he got to her barracks, they were separated, men and women. And he said to her, "Someone told me you were here." She gave him a piece of moldy bread that she kept for emergencies. And he said, "I'm not going to make it, but you have to make it. You have to tell what happened to us. This trauma, this nightmare, this is horrendous." Unfortunately, it was too horrendous for my mother. She never spoke except this story. My father, David, was born in Kozienice, Poland, not far from Warsaw. My father survived with a brother, Jacob, who you saw in the picture, and his cousin Joe. After liberation, Dad found one brother, Joseph, with his wife, Stella. They had been in a labor camp. Dad was in 2 labor camps, Niederruschel and Skarzisko, Germany. This was an ammunition factory, and the factory by Hassak still operates in Germany. He met a German officer, Hans Leffler, who saved my father's life more than once. He left extra bread for my father every day for 2 years. And Dad shared that bread with his cousin, Joe, who you saw from Australia, his brother, Jacob. Dad lost his parents and 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. But this Hans Leffler was very unique. Hans actually left bread for my father, but somebody squealed. Somebody told the Nazis that my father stole bread, or someone stole bread to give someone observed this. And they arrested my father on a Friday, and they kept him in isolation in a closet, standing up and beating him for 3 days because he was going to be killed Monday morning. Leffler, like some of the other Nazis, went home. They had to leave. So once every 2 or 3 weeks, he got, according to my dad, was on his motorcycle and went back to Berlin, Germany. This Hans Leffler came back Monday morning, saw my father's brother, Jacob, and said to him, "Where is Jacob? What happened to Jacob?" And I'm sorry, what happened to David? And Jacob said, they're going to kill him. You know, they think he stole bread. Hans Leffler got on his motorcycle and went into the center of the camp where they were setting up. I don't know if they were going to shoot my father or hang him. This was never clear to me, but doesn't matter. Thank God it didn't happen. Hans gets off the motorcycle, takes his whip and starts screaming and jumping and carrying on. And this is my Jew. And he answers to me and no one else. And he was impossible, make a noise with the whip. And he said, "I will take care of him." He answers to me, and I don't know why, but they released my dad to Hans Leffler, who took him back to the work area of the camp, not in the ammunition factory. He kept my father, my father's brother and his cousin out of the ammunition factory because that's where people died. They breathed in the ammunition and they died very quickly. So he watched over my dad, gave him bread every day that my father shared with his family. And because of that, these families are alive. And I was very grateful. I have spent a lifetime looking for Hans Leffler and his family of course, he's no longer with us, but wanted to thank them for saving my father's life and my uncle and my cousin. And Leffler's name in the Berlin phone book is like Jones or Smith here. Was impossible to locate them. Although the Hassak factory still exists and they kept records, perhaps somebody would know what happened to that family, which might have moved from Berlin. Maybe they don't even live in Germany. But this was very rare, and this was one story. There was a second story, which my cousin in Australia confirmed last night, that my father was, they have roll call that you get up for in the morning and stand in the bitter cold. And I don't know why my father wasn't standing properly. A Nazi with a big bayonet came over to him and cut his foot, which was bleeding badly. And they had to walk across the field. And my father said, "I can't do it. I'm bleeding too heavily." And one of them, either my uncle or my cousin, ripped off a piece of clothing, tore it, and tied it around his foot. And they said to him, "Dave, you have to live." And they each gave him like a shoulder that he could walk them. They were holding him up and he was able to walk across the field. And he told Leffler, I won't be able to do this. I have to go to the hospital. And Leffler said, no, you won't go there. We'll take care of you. And he hid my father in the top of the barracks, at least for a day or two, bringing him stuff to clean the wound. He took care of my dad. And thank God for that, so I could talk to you today. So, Dad, you know, it was amazing because I was one of the first babies born in the DP camp. And again, for anybody who came in late, displaced persons camp, Salzheim, Germany, which is right near Frankfurt, a suburb of Frankfurt. And there I am with my dad, who carried me around on his shoulders. He was so happy, as were all his friends. After all, I was one of the babies, the first babies to be born. This was a miracle. This was a gift. We weren't supposed to exist. I symbolized rebirth and new beginnings. I was so loved. They carried me all day long. There was no time to nap or rest or relax. And I remember it clearly because I'm very lucky to be here. If I was born a year earlier, I wouldn't be here to tell you this story. My cousin was born in a labor camp. My aunt and uncle had a baby, and the baby lived for one day. So I can only tell you, I was so grateful. I was born in freedom. And I am grateful to be alive every day. And there I am again. And my favorite donkey at the Frankfurt Zoo in Frankfurt, Germany. I must have been about 2 years old. This was my best friend, if you could believe it. And I have to tell you, I had to visit this donkey regularly. So I have pretty good memory of the DP camp, which is quite unusual. And Dad cooked for the American soldiers, and he brought home food and milk for Mom and me in the DP camp because we had none. And there he is with his pot coming on lunchtime, bringing milk. I needed, there was no formula. People don't realize we didn't have vitamins. We didn't have a baby formula. We didn't have diapers. So he brought milk when he could. However, I will tell you a very funny story, which has been documented also, that my father decided he needed a cow for milk. So he went to some farm somewhere and stole a cow and brought it to our little place in the DP camp and put it in the backyard so he could milk the cow. However, someone told on my father that we had a cow, and they ended up, the Americans came to see if this was true, and my father and his friend dragged this cow up the stairs and put it in the attic. And the American soldiers and police or whoever came were asking questions, and the noise that was going on up there, like running around. And what's happening up there? My father said, oh, you can't go up there. My best friend has his girlfriend up there. They're busy. So we were able to keep the cow, I guess. But he was a character, my father. And then here's my milk can from the DP camp. I still have it in my home. Pictures here in my home. And this also has a story that we were moved over to Frankfurt, the city, waiting to come to America because nobody could leave until they were adopted or sponsored by an organization or family. So we didn't know any family in America. We thought everyone was gone. And there was a community in Westwood, New Jersey that adopted us. So while we were waiting to have the paperwork and to see if it all was okay, they moved us to an apartment building across the street from the train station in Frankfurt am Main. There's two Frankfurts in Germany, so they call it Frankfurt am Main, the Main River. And we lived at the very top, and there was so many stairs to go down to this little market at the bottom. When you came into the building, there was a little store that sold coffee, milk, cigarettes. So my mother gave me a job, and that with this little milk can, I had to go every day downstairs. I'm like 3 years old. And I put the milk can on one step and then slid down and it took me a whole morning to get down there. And then it took me a long time to come back because the milk can's heavy with milk now. And one time I remember clearly, totally by accident, I fell or I missed a step and the milk can fell over and the milk spilled out. So you can imagine I didn't have milk that day, but this was my little project every day to bring milk upstairs. And there was my dad with his buddies, you know, I can't tell you, and you can see on their faces how grateful and happy they were to be in freedom. Having parties, celebrating somebody's engagement, somebody else is getting married. These are his friends. And once in a while, they would come to the house in Westwood, New Jersey. I'd get to meet some of them. And that's my Uncle Jacob. And he waited in the DP camp to go to Israel. And he finally got there in 1948 to fight in the Israel War of Independence. And actually, we found out when my Uncle Jacob passed that he was quite a well-respected person in the Israeli army. He helped organize all the communication lines from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he took care of me the first 2 years of my life. And we had such a special bond. He was such a special person. There he is with my dad. They were only like a year apart, and they were very close and wonderful together. And there's Dad and Mom waiting, you know, I guess we're in Frankfurt already, waiting to come to America. Look at the change. Look how healthy they look, how happy they are. And so we arrived in Westwood, New Jersey on March 23rd, 1950. We were greeted by an organization called HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, that still helps people, immigrants of all backgrounds now, to place them, to help them, establish them. And so you can see here, this is me with my boots and my babushka. This is the end of March and it was still cold. My dad is standing next to me. This is my little suitcase. That's all I owned. And my little pocketbook. These are the people that, that hosted us, sponsored us. There's my mom. She was almost 9 months pregnant. We arrived March 23rd. My brother was born May 3rd, 1950. We had a terrible plane ride. We didn't come by boat. And it was a cargo plane. So it took forever. My mother and I were very sick. Neither one of us wanted to go on a plane again for many, many years. In fact, I think I didn't go until I was almost 50. But anyway, we were very grateful to be in America. I wrote curriculum for the state of New Jersey. This was mentioned. Caring makes a difference. It was for grades K through 8. It was mandated in New Jersey by the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. It was revised a few times. I think perhaps the original might still be online. If you go to the website for the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education, I helped be the teacher trainer for this curriculum. I traveled New Jersey, went to Israel, Yad Vashem, to share our lessons for elementary. It was quite an experience for me to write this. It was very healing because I just wanted people to know how traumatic this was, and it should never happen to anyone, anywhere, for any reason. I established a Holocaust Center at Metro West in Whippany, New Jersey. I better go back to that for a minute. And participated in a Jewish-German dialogue group established by ADL in the spring of 1994. So I have to say that I was very much influenced by this history when, as a result of the German Jewish dialogue group that came from the Rhineland in Germany, they invited me to go overseas. I took books and shared our lessons with them, and also went to Yad Vashem many summers to share how we teach the Holocaust in America, which was different than how it's taught in Germany and in Israel. And I was hired by Raritan Valley Community College as the director of the Institute for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. I organized educational programs, seminars, teacher workshops, the Learning Through Experience program, which brought 1,000 students for 3 days every year to learn not just about the Holocaust, but about genocide and the consequences of prejudice and the resilience of survivors and the miracle of rescuers. And it was at those programs where I also reunited my father with his liberator that you met, Rabbi Herschel Schechter, and a U.S. soldier, Leon Bass, and others. This was my grandfather, Pincus Schwartzberg, and my grandmother is Pearl, who I'm named for. Her nickname was Peppy. They were from Kozienice, Poland. He was a scribe. He wrote the Torah, and he made leather goods, but the whole family died in Treblinka. I made sure that my father's story was printed and it was in the triumphant spirit. He was also interviewed by the Shoah Foundation because my father would talk all the time, but never in order. So I became their voice. I tried to tell their story because of their resistance and the courageous effort to survive, like many survivors. Dad passed on Tuesday, May 14th, 2013. He was 89 years old and had severe Alzheimer's. This is my mom on her 90th birthday. She also had dementia and Alzheimer's. Her birthday was August 12th, 2016, and she passed October 11th, 2017. So it's been a while since they're gone, but unfortunately, you know, we are very much affected by the Holocaust. And I did create a film, which is available through the Institute of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Raritan Valley Community College. It was translated to Hebrew because of a friend who lives in Israel, who was really touched by the film and felt that Israeli second generation should see it. And they had a conference, an organization called Amka, translated to Hebrew. And many, many people have told me that after hearing the stories of the members of the second generation who belonged to the Holocaust Institute at Raritan Valley Community College, that it opened the door for conversation, a better understanding of how history can affect families and generations. I also made a second film about Margit Feldman, who by chance was in Auschwitz, also on the same death march as my mother, and passed from COVID. She was one of the founders of our institute. We worked very closely together. There's a movie, as you can see. There's also a book about her life. And I had the pleasure of working with her and many other survivors who taught me so much. So again, I want to thank you. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Survivors are passing every day. Their voices need to be heard, and especially with this Holocaust denial, revisionism, anti-Semitism that is reported daily. And not only to us, but the extreme violence and prejudice to many people. And every day I turn on the news and there's another shooting, but not just a shooting, almost a mass shooting. I accept my legacy as a second generation to tell my parents' stories because they could not speak, but also it's a mission to share the knowledge of the dangers of prejudice that leads to violence, to hate speech, to hate crimes. I feel that I have to speak out, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do it. As a child of survivors, I understand the importance of respecting and honoring the human rights of every person, no matter what their background. It is my hope that we can make a difference and create a better, more peaceful world for our children, their children, and future generations. Thank you so much for listening and caring. And I guess it's time for questions.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing your family story. It was very moving, and it looks like people in the chat are already saying things about that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Somebody in the Q&A actually said that they grew up in Westwood, New Jersey. They're wondering if your family owned a business there, and did you attend Temple Emmanuel?
Yes, Rabbi Unger was my rabbi, married my brother, sister, and me. Was very close to him, and I think they ended up going to Woodcliff Lake, where we went there as well. We had no business. We were very, very poor, but very rich in freedom and life. And does the person give a name?
It's Lois Crawley. Crawley.
Yes, I know the name.
She said, oh my God, yes.
Was her brother friendly with my brother Bob? I know the name. Okay. If she needs my email address, feel free to give it to her.
Okay.
It's easy. Anybody can have it. Peppy Margolis at gmail.com. Really easy.
There you guys go. Okay. So someone's asking about the URL for the film.
Which film? The second generation film?
They don't specify.
Okay, but if they...
Yes, that's what they're looking for.
Well, you go to Raritan Valley Community College, Holocaust Institute for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. And under the website, you look for programs, you'll see a link. The film is there. You can view it online.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna try and pull that link together really quick.
Okay.
So hopefully we can get there. And then somebody is asking for your email again. Okay, so let me just type that out.
You can add.
Oh, there it is. Somebody already did it. Someone is asking, are you familiar with the Second Generation Network in the UK?
Yeah, a little bit. I actually was in the UK at a conference in Oxford many years ago, where we, presented Holocaust and genocide papers. And there was a gentleman, there's a Holocaust Center in London, if I remember correctly. And this same gentleman became the head of the Shoah Foundation interviews. His name escapes me, but I know a little bit about it. Yes, I think that's what I'm saying.
And then I'm looking, you said that the video was on the college's Holocaust and Genocide Studies page.
Yes, and I think there's something that says programs, maybe. You have to hit programs. Does it come up there? I'll look. I'll try and use my cell phone while we talk.
Resources, maybe?
Yeah, could be.
Allison, I found it. I put it in the chat.
Beautiful, thank you. You're faster.
Scroll down to programs of the Institute. Press that.
All right, well, thank you very much. And so that's in the chat as well. There are no more questions. I think everybody was just blown away by the stories that you were able to share with us today, and we very much appreciate it. And everybody in the chat and the Q&A, everybody has been so incredibly thankful and moved. So thank you so much, Peppy, for taking the time to tell us your family stories, share that with us, and hopefully continue. We can continue as a society to talk about this and remember. So thank you very much. And we're going to go ahead and end the program for today. And if you guys haven't yet, we have some programs that are coming up if you want to take a look. But otherwise, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And again, thank you, Peppy.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.